Hello everyone, greetings from Storycorner at Bookmine, and this time around in our festival storytelling series, I would like to tell you the story of Bhagwan Mahavira. It is on Deepavali Night that Bhagwan Mahavira attained Nirvana, so it is a good occasion, according to me, to look at his extraordinary life and the kind of rigorous penance that he did and the tests that he imposed on himself, and so on and so forth. So long ago, in the city-state of Vaishali in Bihar, in a little town called Kundagram, Bhagwan Mahavir was born as Vardhaman to King Siddharth and his queen Trishala Devi. Now this king was a very fair and just ruler, and he was well loved by all his subjects. And before Vardhaman was born, there were a lot of very auspicious signs. She had a dream one day in which she dreamt about goddess Lakshmi. She saw some elephants and the sun and the moon, and she saw the beautiful Padma Sarovar, the Shira Sagar, and a flag, and many other very auspicious signs. She was a little disturbed, so she told her husband, King Siddharth, about this, and then they decided to call people who could interpret these dreams, and they also looked up a lot of books, and they all concurred that a great soul was about to take birth in Queen Trishala Devi. And the legend is that this child was actually conceived by a Brahmin lady, and it was implanted into her womb by the gods. And then this wonderful prince Vardhaman was born in the month of Chaitra. He was a fearless and brave and very fine boy, and right from his childhood he was simply not afraid of anything. Once while playing with his friends, he was perched on a tree, not knowing that there was a huge snake coiling around the base, and all his friends were on the branches, and they were all playing, and suddenly they heard the snake hissing and slithering, and all the children ran away in sheer fright. But Vardhaman very calmly jumped down from the branch where he was sitting, and with a thud, and he caught the snake, which was a cobra, black cobra with yellow eyes. He caught it by the tail, and he very nonchalantly threw it away. And when his friends asked him, weren't you afraid of the snake? He said, the only thing that you have to be afraid of is fear itself. So he was always very fearless. And a little later, when he was about 8 or so, he along with his friends were playing a game called Pretend Horse. And as you all know, in this game, the loser had to pretend to be the horse, and the winner of the previous round would ride on his back. Now one of the gods wanted to take part in this game, and so assuming the form of a little boy, came and joined in the game and pretended to lose, and then Vardhaman happened to climb onto his back. And then all of a sudden this godlike being assumed a huge form. He was as tall could be. His eyes were all bloodshot. His hair turned all matted, and he was hideous, to say the least. And all the children were terrified and didn't know what to do. But Vardhaman fearlessly sat on his back and tapped him on the shoulder and egged him on, and he rode in grand style into the palace. Now all the people in the palace saw this sight, and they wanted to attack this hideous being. But Vardhaman said, just leave him alone. It is enough if he realizes that what he has done is wrong. There can be no greater punishment than that. And anyway, who are we to forgive him? And then this godlike being turned to Vardhaman and said, you are really very, very brave. You are Veer. And then he changed his mind. He said, actually, I think you are very brave. You are Mahavira. And that is how the name Mahavira stuck. Now, as Mahavira was growing older, he was sent to school to educate himself and acquire knowledge. But he was already very, very mature and very wise for his age, and he was not really interested in that formal kind of education, because he was very knowledgeable. He just had new things on his own, and he was also very pensive and reclusive most of the time. He hated wars. He hated people harming any animals or any other creatures. He didn't like them being killed, and he also didn't like people fighting for power and property. So he was far too mature for his age, and he really wanted to be on his own, and he wanted to meditate and do penance in the forest, and he was a kind of a loner around that time. Then his parents thought that maybe if they got him married, it would be a good thing. He would probably change. So they found a very suitable bride, Princess Yashoda, and they were married for some time, and he also had a daughter called Priyadarshana. So after the child was born, Mahavir still continued to be the same way that he was. His thoughts were all on doing penance, and he believed that people should really be fighting their own internal enemies and not engaging in any kind of war or fights with other people. His mother got a sense of what was running through his mind and his desire to renounce the world. So one day she came to him and sat him down and told him, Vardhaman, I know that you are very wise, and you're very keen to do penance, and your path is the pursuit of universal happiness, and that I know that you are contemplating renunciation at this point, but please, your parents are growing old, and if you were to renounce the world, the pain of separation would be too much, and we would probably not be able to handle it, and we would die very quickly. So Mahavir was very moved by what his mother said, and he said, yes, mother, I know that mother is the highest pilgrimage, and so he assured her that he would not renounce the world as long as his parents were alive. Now when Mahavir was 28 years old, his parents passed on. And when he was all set to leave the palace, his brother came to him, his older brother. He had absolutely no ego. He wasn't wearing a crown or scepter or holding a scepter or anything. He came to him and said, Vardhaman, I'm still grieving for our parents, and if you too leave at this point, it would be really too much for me to bear. So Vardhaman relented, and he said he would wait for 2 more years and then he would renounce the world. Now for Vardhaman, it didn't make any difference whether he was in the palace or like in the future, whether he was going to be in the forest, because even while he was in the palace, he was deep in meditation. He was contemplating. His thoughts were on a different plane, and as the day for his renunciation drew near, he started giving away all his wealth, all the gold and silver that he had, until he had completely exhausted all of it, and then he felt very, very light, and he was ready to renounce the world. And then he came to an Ashoka tree where he clipped off all his locks, and he started to live the life of an ascetic. And from that point on, he said that I will not commit any kind of sin, either by thought, word or deed, nor will I be party to it. And at that very moment, a beautiful apron, or you can call it a towel, dropped down, which was gifted to him by Lord Indra, and it landed on his shoulder, and it was called Devadushya. Now Mahavir, as he was walking along in the forest, a poor Brahmin came to him and asked him for alms. Now, since he had absolutely nothing to give to the Brahmin except this piece of cloth, because he was already an ascetic, and that was the only thing he had on him, so he tore a piece of the cloth and gave it to the Brahmin, which he accepted. Now there was a weaver who spoke to the Brahmin and said, why don't you ask him to give you another piece of that apron, so that I could weave it and make it whole, and then I could sell it and make money. The Brahmin was a little reluctant, because that was the only thing that Mahavir had on him, and by some strange coincidence, that apron dropped off from Mahavir's shoulders, and the Brahmin picked it up. And from that moment on, Mahavir decided that he would not have a stitch of clothing on his body. So he continued walking through the forest, spending a lot of time in penance and meditation. He would stand for hours on end and meditate, and once while he was meditating, there came a shepherd who had brought his bullocks to graze, and as it was nearing sundown, the shepherd told Mahavir, who was deep in meditation, that told him that he had to go home and milk the cows So he asked Mahavir to keep a watch on the bulls while he was away. So the shepherd went away and milked the cows and then came back, and when he came back there was absolutely no sign of the bulls anywhere. So he tried asking Mahavir if he had seen them and where they might be, and there was no response because Mahavir was too deep in meditation. So after hunting high and low, the shepherd passed the night there in the forest, and the next morning when he woke up, he found the bulls all grazing very close to Mahavir. So the shepherd got really angry. He said, this person is really playing a trick on me, and he possibly lied or withheld any kind of information by being deep in meditation. So he took hold of the rope with which the bulls were tied and began whipping Mahavir. And just then Lord Indra appeared and told the shepherd, do you know who he is? And you shouldn't be doing this to him. And then the shepherd realized his mistake and he said, it's really my misfortune that I suspected the intentions of a person who had renounced his entire kingdom and was doing meditation here, and I even cast aspersions on him, and he deeply regretted what he's done. So then Lord Indra told Mahavir, he said that as you continue on your path, you are bound to find many people like this who would harass you and trouble you. So please, why don't you allow me to protect you? And Mahavir refused point blank. He said, I am on the path to self-realization, and whatever I have to face has to be endured alone. And therefore he declined any offer of help from Lord Indra. So as Mahavir continued roaming around in these forests, he once came across a hermitage by the banks of a spring, and he decided to pass the 4 months of the winter season that is called Chaturmas in that place, because that hermitage, the head of the hermitage, was a friend of his father, King Siddharth, and he offered the place a small hut in that hermitage to Vardhaman or Mahavira. So Mahavir accepted his invitation and stayed there for a while. Now that particular year the rains failed, and there was absolutely no fodder for the animals, and it was all dry, and the animals even began to they got so hungry that they started eating the thatch on the roofs of these huts. Now all the ascetics were guarding the huts and shooing away the animals, but Mahavir alone was steeped in meditation all the time. And so they brought this to the notice of the head of the hermitage, who sounded out Mahavir about this and sort of hinted that it wasn't nice for him to be in meditation while all the grass and other things the thatch was being eaten. And Mahavir decided that that was not the place for him to stay. He decided to move on, and that day he took a few vows. He decided that he would find some place that would be conducive to meditation. It could be any place. It could be a deserted house, it could be an abandoned palace or a crematorium, or just about anywhere. But he would choose such a place to meditate, and that he would spend most of his time in silence. And that was also the time when he decided that he would never use any cutlery, and that he would eat with his own hands, and that he did not want to be obligated to any householder or head of a hermitage. So he continued moving through the forest like a lion, fearless. He imposed the strictest conditions on himself. He literally punished himself because he wore no footwear, he had no canopy over his head, he went without food many times, no water. He braved many, all the taunts that people subjected him to. For instance, when he came to a place called Astigrana, a place full of skeletons, there was a yaksha who literally tormented him with snakes and poisonous ants and insects, but Mahavir was absolutely unmoved, because he was totally lost in meditation, and very often these the people who taunted him finally relented and felt deeply sorry for what they had done to him. Even some of the gods tested him by kicking up a lot of dust and creating a storm and flinging him up and down. So he really went through a lot, because he was constantly testing his threshold. Because Mahavir believed in a few things, like non-violence. He believed in truth. He believed in not stealing. He believed in not being attached to any objects or anything of value. And he also believed in the vow of chastity. So he was constantly testing himself. Even when he had a companion or a disciple with him, he would not take any steps to protect himself, because he was testing his own limits. So like I said, he wandered on and on and on for many years, and when he was about 42, after two rounds of chat fasting, he knelt down in a Godahasana posture by the banks of the Rijupalika river, and that was where he attained enlightenment. He became omniscient. And that was when he also became an Arihant. He was truly enlightened, and he was omniscient. And he gathered a large number of disciples over the years. Several thousand monks and nuns began to join him, and they wanted initiation, and he started a sangha or a tirtha, and he was known as the Charam Tirthankar, or the prime, the founder of this movement called Jainism. And as he started giving discourses and preaching to people, he continued along. Years passed, and then he knew that his end was near, when he was about 72, when he would attain Nirvana. And even Lord Indra tried persuading him and tried telling him that why don't you postpone it for some more time. But Mahavir was very clear in his mind. He said that he did not want his body to stand in the way of salvation. He had exhausted all of his karmas, and he was ready to let go. And the people were all very desolate. They were thinking that he might put it off for a while because his prime disciple Gautama was away. But Mahavir, knowing that that attachments would come in the way of his Nirvana, had actually sent him away, dispatched him on another mission. So Pawapuri is where Mahavir attained Nirvana, and that is where he is cremated, and his footprints are deified. And this again is in Bihar. It's a very, very, very holy site for Jains, and all the huge congregation that had gathered after hearing of his passing and cremation, they dug out a lot of mud from that area, and in time that got filled with water and became a kind of lake, and that is where you have the Jal Mandir, and this was a temple that was built by Mahavir's older brother Nandi Vardhan. So almost over 2,500 years later, Mahavir's teachings still make sense. They're still very relevant. The prime message that he sent out was that it's important to fight one's own internal enemies, such as greed, power, lust for things, and speaking untruths. He said we had to fight all these internal enemies rather than engaging in external kind of warfare. And on Deepavali night, which is a time when he attained Nirvana, it's wonderful to at least for me to be able to recall all of his many. There are many stories around Mahavir, but I have just chosen a few and to put them together and make this presentation to you. I hope you all liked it. Thank you very much. Happy Diwali, and see you soon.